This all started a few weeks ago. I will give a little background first. I met my girlfriend just after college, and we have been together for a little over 7 years. We currently live in a 2-bedroom cottage in our hometown. It is very rural where we live, and it takes around an hour to get into the city. We both work in the city, but I work a couple of days a week from home. The company my girlfriend works for is a non-profit, charitable organization. She works in the social media department, and their main ethos is to encourage positive change. The videos they promote are usually quite uplifting videos. They share a lot of them, but also create their own. This means that she will occasionally appear in the videos if they are interviewing someone or acting something out. A few weeks ago, she told me to check out one of the videos where she had interviewed someone. I watched the video and then decided to read some of the comments. I am not a very jealous person, but I kind of wanted to know what people were saying, specifically about her. The comments were pretty mundane at first, the usual fight the power type responses. I became a bit obsessed and kept scrolling through. There was the occasional misogynist comment, but nothing I did not expect. That was until I found a few comments that unsettled me. The original comment had around 10 likes and had tagged a number of other accounts. The message said, "We cannot wait for you to join us. You are perfect." I clicked on the replies, and the accounts that had been tagged had all replied. The messages ranged from stating that she was the perfect match for their group to openly discussing what type of underwear they thought she was wearing. This was discussed in quite some detail. I figured it was just a bunch of desperate guys until I read another reply. It said how he had watched her eating her lunch in the park yesterday. He wanted to go up to her and introduce himself, but knew that was not part of the rules. He described in detail what she was wearing. It was exactly what she wore yesterday. I contacted my girlfriend to tell her about this and advised her to delete the comments and contact the admins of the site. I looked through previous videos and saw that these comments were frequent on videos she appeared in. They were always the same and always mentioned her joining them and how she was exactly what they wanted. They were all throwaway accounts, with the only friends being the people that were tagged in the comments. The accounts were reported to the site admins, and we heard nothing more of it for a couple of weeks. That was until late last week. I received a phone call from my girlfriend while I was working from home. Well, that was unexpected. "But how did you get them to agree to putting that?" she said in a giddy tone. "Sorry, I am not sure what you mean. Is everything okay?" I said, confused. "The flowers, silly. I love them." The note was a bit naughty though. "What if my colleagues saw that?" she said, chuckling down the phone. "What do you mean?" "I did not send flowers." "But who did then?" "What did the note say?" "Maybe they are from your mom." "No," she paused, then continued. "The note said, 'Roses are red, violets are blue. I am using my hand but thinking of you.'" "What the hell?" "What?" "Call the police. That is disgusting," I said, standing up, almost throwing my phone across the room. She sounded shaken up and abruptly ended the call, telling me she was going to contact the police. I drove up to her office later that evening to pick her up, rather than her getting the train. I was terrified at the thought of someone following her once she left the office. The police took the letter in as evidence. They also looked through the comments to see if they could trace the comments back to the people behind the accounts. The flowers had not been sent through a company or courier service, which means that one of these men must have hand-delivered them to the front desk. We were both shaken up on the way home and barely spoke about the incident. Her boss told her to work from home for the rest of the week until everything calmed down. We did not hear anything after that for a few days, and her boss told us that nothing else had arrived at the office. We went to see family this weekend to try and take our minds off things. We arrived back home a few hours ago, and something immediately felt off. The house itself seemed untouched, but the back garden gate was left wide open. I entered the house cautiously and searched the whole house, but found nothing. I went to the back of the cottage and noticed some marks on the back window. It looked as if someone had been clasping their hands together to look inside. We debated calling the police, but was tired and could not prove anything. We also live quite far away from the nearest police station, so it would take them a while to get here. We closed all of the curtains and made sure the place was locked up and headed to bed. I kept the phone next to me on speed dial just in case and had my trusty bat at the side of the bed. I could not sleep much, so decided to head into the living room and watch some television. I was about to call it a night when I heard some commotion coming from the front of the cottage. I hesitantly walked over to the window and pulled back the curtains slightly. It was dark, but I could make out a number of hooded figures standing around 15 feet from the house. They were swaying in sync with each other and chanting something unintelligible. I opened the curtains a little more to get a better look, and as I did, the figures stopped chanting and stared directly at me. In the brief moment that I looked over at them, I saw their faces. They were men, but their faces were void of any emotion at all. They were completely blank as they stared at me, as if staring through me. I quickly pulled the curtains back in pure terror and stumbled across the hallway back into the bedroom. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Let's continue. I grabbed the phone, waking my girlfriend up in all of the commotion. She groggily awoke, asking me what was wrong. I told her I would explain in a minute and called the police. I began speaking to the operator when the chanting began to start up once again. I turned away for a brief moment to grab my bat when I noticed the chanting had stopped. I turned around to see my girlfriend peering outside the window. She was completely motionless as I shouted at her to get away from the window. She turned to me, her eyes wide, her face pale in fear. She wanted to scream, but could not formulate a response. I walked over to her and pulled her towards me. She pushed me away slightly and motioned at me to look. The operator asked me to explain what was happening and to stay on the line, but I could not speak. I looked outside of the window at the men who were now perched on their knees. They were performing some kind of prayer or ritual. They were making strange hand gestures in an almost dance-like fashion. They were no longer in sync with each other and were all creating different symbols with their hands. The men gradually got back to their feet and huddled in a circular formation. They broke apart, and one of the men appeared from the center of the circle holding a large, plain white box. He held it above his head before placing it gently in front of the cottage. They performed one final chant before turning around and slowly fading off into the distance. We are sitting here waiting for the police to arrive. I would leave, but I am terrified they are still out there. They should be here soon. I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea how they found out where we live, and I have no idea what is in that box. I am not sure I want to know. We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. Every creak, every gust of wind unnerved us. I wanted to pack up and leave, but my girlfriend was against the idea. We waited a little while longer and eventually heard sirens in the distance. I immediately breathed a sigh of relief. There was a knock at the door soon after. The relief I felt quickly turned to paranoia in my tired state. I was still afraid that these people could be anyone. They could be our neighbors down the street, or the very police officers asking us to answer the door. I peeked through the peephole, and seeing the police officers' sullen faces somehow put me at ease. I worked up the courage to open the front door, and the two police officers introduced themselves as Officers Jenkins and Henderson. I immediately began to blurt out some incoherent word vomit. I sounded insane, talking about a group of men chanting and praying outside of our house. They eventually managed to calm me down, and I began to explain the situation clearer. They were perplexed by what I was saying and looked at me as if I were mad. They entered the house and saw my girlfriend on the bed, shaking nervously. Jenkins directed me towards the living room, while Henderson calmly began to speak with my girlfriend. I sat there in silence for a little while before Henderson returned from the bedroom. He whispered something to Jenkins before he spoke to me. He told me that my girlfriend had confirmed my story. I did not like the way he sarcastically sounded out the word story when he said it. It was as if he were mocking me. The two police officers sat at the dining table and asked me to start from the beginning. I explained absolutely everything to them in as much detail as I could. It was dark outside when we saw the men, however, so I did not have much of a description to give them. I could make out basic features, but not enough to give a vivid description. I could not even remember how many of them there were. I told the officers that the men had left a box outside and Henderson motioned to Jenkins to check it out. He re-entered the house a little while later, slightly out of breath and a little bit more frantic than before. You need to see this, he said in a cracked voice. Okay, I will be right back. Stay inside, Henderson said to me in an assertive manner. Officer Jenkins glanced me a worried look as they exited the room. I sat there momentarily before curiosity got the better of me. I told my girlfriend I would be right back and headed outside. She had calmed down a little at this point and was on the phone with her mother. There was an unpleasant smell in the air as I exited the house. It got stronger and more gag-inducing as I got closer to the box. The box was around 3 to 4 feet in length and quite shallow. The lid had been removed and the 2 officers were standing next to the police car in the driveway. Jenkins was pacing next to the car while Henderson was calling in for backup. I focused my attention back towards the box and walked closer to look inside. I stumbled back initially, as I thought there was a person inside of the box. Inside of the box was what looked like a handmade doll of some kind. It had a head, but no features on its face. It was crudely made, with one long arm at the side, and the head was coming apart from the neck. It was dressed in a white, disheveled wedding dress and surrounded by dark, decaying flowers that filled the remainder of the box. The dress itself had been slashed around the chest area, cutting through the stuffing of the doll, creating a large hole. The surrounding chest area of the dress was covered in what I can only assume was blood splatter. Carefully placed inside of the hole was a heart. It was almost certainly an animal's heart, but it immediately made me gag. I jumped as I heard Henderson shout over to me. He frantically ushered me back inside of the house and told me to wait inside and lock the doors while they searched the area. He was much more serious this time. I locked the front door as he requested and sat next to my girlfriend in the bedroom. She asked me if everything was okay, and I replied that it was. I did not mention the box, as there was no need to worry her any more than she already was. A couple more police cars arrived shortly after that, and we were told to remain in the house for the time being. We stayed inside for a little while before being asked if we had anywhere else we could stay for a few days. I was more than happy to get out of that house for a little while, and one of the police cars escorted us to my parents' house, which is a 15-minute drive. We arrived at my parents' house around 4 p.m. UK time. We had not slept for over 24 hours and were pretty out of it when we arrived. After briefly explaining the events to my parents, we locked ourselves in one of the bedrooms and tried to get some sleep. I must have passed out shortly after, because when I woke, the sun was rising through the darkness. There was a soft knocking coming from the bedroom door. I was alarmed at first, until I heard my father's voice. He told me that the police were here to ask a few questions and asked if I felt up to it. I gently closed the door to not wake my girlfriend and headed downstairs. The 2 police officers from before were standing at the foot of the stairs and asked to speak to me in private. We apologize for bothering you so early. We conducted a search of the area, and we need to ask you some questions, Henderson said in a much more official capacity than before. Okay, what is happening? I quickly rebutted. We need to show you some photographs. Can you identify anyone that looks familiar? Henderson said. He opened a small plastic folder and removed an array of photos. They were all pictures of women. They looked like stock photos that were pulled from the internet. The photos were professional-grade quality, and the women were all dressed in either evening gowns or wedding dresses. I gulped as I scanned my eyes over the women's faces. Their faces were contorted into a fearful gaze. They looked tired and beat up as they stared ahead. The majority of the women were hunched over and had bruising on the parts of skin that could be seen. What is this? I said as I raised my head, disturbed at the images. He glanced at his partner for a moment before turning back to me. We conducted a search of the area last night. In the early hours, we searched the barn in the field behind your house. Inside of the barn there seemed to have been what I can only describe at the moment as religious activity. These photos were found among others. We are attempting to identify the women in these photos at present. Religious activity, I said. He once again glanced at his partner before taking a deep breath and exhaling. We cannot divulge any more information at this point. We will need you and your girlfriend to come down to the station to make an official statement when you feel up to it. We will contact you if we need anything more from you. We have police cars patrolling the area just in case. They got up to leave before Anderson turned back towards me. I should not be saying this. We found pictures of you and your girlfriend dating back to last year. The photos were taken from a distance, and it seems that these people had been watching you for a little while before making contact. None of this was hidden, so I assume they did not care if the barn was found. I strongly suggest you remain here for the time being and do not return to the house. I nodded back to him as it was the only response I could muster. I sat there in silence after they left, trying to wrap my head around the whole situation. If they had been watching us for months, why had they not made their move sooner? They would have had countless opportunities in the past where my girlfriend was alone in the cottage. She would also go for lone, early morning runs through the field. Were the women in the pictures once in similar situations? I also have no idea what that doll means. I have a million questions, but no answers. If anyone can enlighten me on any of this, I would appreciate any help I can get. We are going to stay at my parents' for the time being, as it is in a more residential area. It is a detached house, but the neighbors are all a stone's throw away. We have both taken some time off of work, and I will update if there are any more developments. These people do not seem to be going away anytime soon. We have been moved to an undisclosed, secure location. We have been told to not disclose our location to anyone, nor make direct contact with anyone back home. I have not told them I am writing up my accounts of what is happening. They would not allow this. At this point, though, I feel this is beyond the comprehension of the local police. I cannot imagine they have dealt with anything like this before. It had all calmed down over the past few days, and it felt as if the storm had finally settled. In that short time, it was as if everything had returned to some semblance of normality. I knew, though, in the back of my mind, that it was not over. The only time we had left the house was to write up an official report at the police station. There had been no new developments in the case, as far as we were aware, and no sightings of these people. That was until yesterday evening, when the sirens in the distance brought us back to reality. I hoped that they would pass us by, but as the sirens drew closer, I knew it was for us. I opened the front door to 3 police cars pulling up to the house. A police officer exited one of the cars and jogged up to the front door. "Sir, we need you and your family to pack a bag immediately. We need to leave as soon as possible," he said abruptly. What's going on? Has something happened? I said. "Sir, I need you all to pack a bag immediately and come with us," he said, in a hurried tone. We all packed up a bag each and headed off into the unknown. The sincerity in the police officer's tone had made me blindly follow orders. I consistently asked questions on the way, but received no response. We sat there in silence for most of the trip, and after an hour of driving, we arrived at a house. We entered the house and were greeted by 2 plain-clothed police officers. We emotionlessly walked around the house as they gave us a brief tour. They then directed us to the living room and asked us to take a seat. We all sat down in the living room in silence until one of the officers spoke. "There have been some developments in the case. There will be an official report given soon. We needed to move you and your family as soon as possible, as we believe there is a serious threat to your safety," he said before briefly pausing. I think he was expecting some kind of response, but none of us spoke a word. The officer continued. "We received reports this evening concerning a group of people congregating outside of your house. Police officers were dispatched to the scene, but when they arrived, the people had already left. The front windows to the house had all been broken, and the front door was off of its hinges. The police officers entered the house at around 8 p.m. and searched the property. They entered the bedroom." He cleared his throat and wiped his brow before continuing. "They entered the bedroom of the property and found a female tied to the bed. She was spread across the bed and was pronounced dead on arrival." He cleared his throat once again and shot a worried look to his partner. His partner nodded to him, and the officer continued. "The woman had been mutilated, and her blood was strewn across the wall to create a message. We had to move you immediately as we feel you are in imminent danger from these people. The message said, "Not right for him. You will be." There was also a number carved into the woman's chest. It was the number 21. Does this mean anything to any of you? I thought about it, but could not come up with anything at all. That is not our age, nor is it either of our birthdays. I mentioned that it may be the amount of victims, but the officers did not seem to agree. We all sat there staring off into the distance before my girlfriend began to cry uncontrollably. I attempted to console her with my mother, but it was not much use. That could have been her laid out across that bed. That still could be. These people seem resilient, and we cannot hide forever. Seeing her in this state, my fear quickly turned to rage. I shouted at the police officers, "What is the next course of action? What the hell are we supposed to do? You will need to remain here for the time being. We will be posted inside the house and a police car will be outside. We will find these people," the officer said, turning to face me. The police officers exited the room on that note and gave us some time alone. We must have sat there for an hour in silence before we finally decided to head off to sleep. The police being inside and outside of the house allowed us to regain some kind of feeling of security. They could not know where we were. That would be impossible. They would surely not come to the house with the police here anyway. I waited for my girlfriend to pass out from exhaustion before I finally managed to fall asleep myself. I awoke several times throughout the night. It was not the cult that was haunting my dreams. It was that doll. The featureless face was more detailed with each passing nightmare. They all had the exact same theme, and it was almost an out-of-body experience. I was watching myself and my girlfriend sleeping from the far wall. I was glued to the spot, unable to move. The doll was at the end of the bed with its back towards me in the first nightmare. I awoke suddenly, but quickly passed out again soon after, brushing it off. The next time, it had slowly began to turn its head. I awoke in a panic and searched around the room and under the bed. I knew I was being crazy, but I could not help it. I felt like something was watching me, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I finally fell asleep again a little while later. The next nightmare lasted a little bit longer. It had turned its head, and it was facing my direction. It had stitching where the eyes and mouth would be. The stitching was moving vigorously, as if something was attempting to break the stitching away. It would be as if you had duct tape on your mouth and eyes, and were desperately trying to remove it without access to your hands. This one unsettled me a little bit more than the others, but once again, I somehow managed to fall back to sleep. I was so tired at this point that I could not keep my eyes open, even if I wanted to. In the final nightmare, before I woke this morning, it had broken free from the stitching. It was looking directly at me. The stitching had been replaced with endless pools of darkness. I could sense the evil within the stare. I could feel the sweat dripping down from my forehead. I looked down, and the long arm at the side of the doll was gently caressing my girlfriend's leg as it looked towards me. It was all just a nightmare, but every time I close my eyes, I swear that I can see it. I think I must just be exhausted from this whole situation. I have barely slept over the past week, and I think everything is getting to me now. We are prisoners in this house. We cannot leave or contact anyone on the outside. This is my only means of communication with the outside world. I do not feel safe. I think that these people will do anything in their power to make sure she is theirs. I feel that they are just biding their time. There must be a reason why. I think that the number 21 must have something to do with all of this. We have been here for 3 days now. There have been no news reports or police statements. I have been vigorously checking online for any kind of update. The police officers have been deflecting all of my questions regarding the matter. They just keep reiterating to us that we are in the safest place possible. I sat down with my father tonight with the intention of researching further into this ourselves. There is an estimated 275,000 people reported missing every year in the UK. Most of these are quickly found, but there are still a lot of people that remain missing. We were literally looking for a needle in a haystack. We searched the local area, and although there was a number of missing people reported, only one stood out. There was a woman, a few years back, that went missing from the local area. She was in her mid-20s and lived alone. There was an appeal online from her parents. It was a rather lengthy post giving details on the case and asking for any further information. The post stated that in the weeks leading up her disappearance, she had reported that she felt as if she was constantly being watched. It also stated that a week prior to her disappearance, her house had been broken into, but nothing had been taken. There was no mention of a cult or anything similar. The official report gave a completely different story. The woman had a history with drug abuse, and it was assumed that she had overdosed. There was a lake near her house, and it was speculated that she had fallen into the lake and drowned. The body was never found. The parents strongly objected to this, stating that she had overcome her addiction years before and would not have relapsed. They were adamant on this, and the appeal was still open, even with the case closed. The thing that stood out the most was the date. The woman was reported missing on the 20th of June, 2013. The report stated that she may have been missing slightly before this, as no one had spoke to her 2 days prior to it being reported. I appreciate the comments, as it made things a lot easier. I have been feeling crabby recently, and they certainly lightened the mood. We researched into the summer solstice, which happens on the 21st of June. It varies from year to year, but that is the date for 2017. It is an occult ritual that has been celebrated by a variety of groups. The pagans, among others, celebrate this date. It is when the sun is at the highest point that a human or animal will be sacrificed as an offering. I am not certain that this is what that number means, but it petrified me. It makes frighteningly logical sense at this point. We looked a little into other suggestions. It could be the amount of victims the cult has taken. I find this unlikely though, with the aggression they are showing us. It would seem that something would have been reported before. That is, unless they are becoming more desperate to complete the ritual. I should mention that there have been quite a few visitors since we have been here. I have not seen a uniformed officer in a few days, and the officers that are watching us seem to change frequently. I guess that's normal, as everyone needs downtime at some point. I also cannot see the patrol car that is meant to be watching the house. There are men outside though, who are constantly watching the house. The officers seemed friendly, so I had not been too worried or inquisitive. I figured they have a job to do, and we should leave them to it. It felt nice to have some semblance of safety and security. A few hours ago, I awoke to commotion and shouting coming from downstairs. It was still dark outside. I glanced at my phone and saw that it was 11 p.m. I walked down the stairs and saw the two on-duty officers talking to a woman in the living room. The woman was an older woman, with an air of authority about her. It felt as if she was chastising the officers. They were louder before, but must have heard the stairs creak, as they were now speaking in hushed tones. I heard one of them whisper something about it not being the right time yet, as I got closer. I knocked on the door, even though it was open, to announce my presence. The talking abruptly ceased, and they all just sat there staring at one another. The two officers sat there like naughty children, not saying a word and looking at the woman for assurance. The woman slowly lifted herself off of the chair and walked towards me with a wide grin stretched across her face. "Oh, hello there. You must be Jason. I am sorry, did we wake you?" She paused briefly before continuing. "I am one of the detectives working on your case. I just wanted to come over and check on you all. It is nothing to worry about, and there have been no new developments," she said while holding out her hand to greet me. "There is still no news on anything," I said, stepping back slightly. "Nope, not much of anything yet, I am afraid. You should try and go back to sleep. We can all talk more in the morning," she said while grabbing my hand and directing me out of the room, her grin unwavering, the smile only mildly detracting from her sinister stare. I released my hand from the woman's grip and wearily headed back upstairs. She looked at me inquisitively, as if I had heard or seen something I should not have. I began to quicken my pace as I got upstairs and locked the door behind me as I entered the bedroom. Something felt off. I suddenly felt a wave of fear rush over me. I sat there staring at the door for what felt like hours before I began to write this down. I expected someone to break through the door at any moment, but nothing happened. I was about to post my accounts of what has happened when my phone began to ring. It was a number that I did not have saved in my phone. I did not want to answer it and let it ring out. A voicemail notification popped up on the screen soon after. I opened it up and immediately heard a familiar voice on the other end. "Hi Jason, this is Officer Henderson. Sorry to call you so late. We have just been to your parents' house to check on you. But all of the lights were off and there are no cars. I guess you have got away from the madness for a little while. I hope that all is okay. Can you call me back when you get this, as we need you both to come down to the station to answer some more questions?" I staggered back, speechless. Why was he not aware that we had been moved into protective custody? I heard loud noises coming from outside. I moved towards the window and peered out of the curtains. The woman was now shouting at the men outside. She was pointing at the house furiously. I quickly ducked down as she turned to face our window. I think she saw me. I slowly raised my head towards the window again, and the woman and the two men were staring directly at me. She sighed to herself before they all began walking towards the house. I ducked back down again out of view. I heard the front door slam shut soon after. I woke my girlfriend, and we moved everything we could move to block the door. I did not have time to explain, but she immediately knew something was wrong. I grabbed my phone and called the number back, but the line was busy. I tried again and again until I finally got through. H. "Hello, is that Officer Henderson?" I said, barely able to form a sentence. "Hello, Jason. Sorry about the late night call. I just got a little worried when no one was in. Is everything okay?" We have been moved into protective custody. We have been here for 3 days," I said, my voice cracking with every word. "We did not arrange that. That makes no sense. Where are you? Who took you there?" he said. I could hear the panic in his voice. I do not know where we are. There are people all around the house. I think they know," I said, before he interrupted me. "Keep your phone on. We will attempt to triangulate your location." We sat there in silence for another 20 minutes, until a gentle tapping on the bedroom door could be heard. I attempted to scream at them to leave us alone, but it came out as more of a soft whimper. I still had the phone to my ear and could hear Officer Henderson shouting down the radio to hurry up. "I can hear something. What is happening? The local police are only a few minutes away. You need to lock yourself in a secure room. Hello." The banging on the door is becoming incessant. The woman was calmly asking us to open the door, but now she is manically screaming. I am not listening to her. They have no reason to keep me alive. They only need my girlfriend alive and I have to protect her. The fear has overcome us, and we can do nothing but sit here motionlessly, staring at the door. I can only sit here in silence and wait for the police to arrive. I can only sit here in silence as my mother's agonizing screams for help pierce through me. I can only sit here in silence as the sound of my father's bones cracking resonates throughout the house while he tearfully begs us not to open the door. I tried to stop it. I had begged and pleaded through the door for my parents' safety, but was met with contempt. The heinous sounds of laughing mixed with my parents' screams quickly overcome me. I began to remove the barricade from the door as rage and fear rushed through me. I had removed most of the barricade when I turned to my girlfriend. She had not spoken a word throughout all of this. She sat there, pale as a ghost, rocking back and forth. I stared at her, looking for any kind of guidance, but received none. I attempted to plead for my parents' lives over and over again, but I only received one response. They would make a trade. A like-for-like trade in a sense. They would allow my parents to live if I opened the door and handed my girlfriend over. I feel they could have broken the door down if they wanted to. I think they enjoyed me having to make a decision of this magnitude. I knew that if I opened the door, none of us would live. There was far too many of them for me to stand any chance of getting out alive. I am not a trained fighter and barely had any weapons at my disposal. I began to slowly place items back in front of the door as tears streamed down my cheeks. I was handing my parents a death sentence. The people who had raised me and always had me at the forefront of their mind. I was now about to turn my back on them. I sat back down and covered my ears to block out the misery and pain. the sounds of my mother and father soon dissipated, as silence engulfed the house. The monotonous, constant cackling was all I could hear over the buzzing in my ears. The woman was mocking me. She wanted me to open the door. It took every single fiber of my being not to do so. After a little while, the sounds of the woman also disappeared. We were left in complete silence. Sirens soon filled the silence, and flashing lights lit up the house. The sound of the door being broken in was quickly followed by the police announcing themselves. Then the sound of footsteps getting closer and closer. "This is the police." "Plea, what the hell is that? We need backup, immediately." Get down on the ground right now. Do not move." I sat there motionless, unable to face what was on the other side of the door. The door handle soon began to jolt up and down as the police asked us to open the door. I moved over to the door unaware if this was just another ploy. It was at the point where it no longer mattered. I had lost all faith. I removed the barricade and opened the door. I fell to my knees as soon as I gazed upon the carnage that was ensuing outside of the room. The police officer just stared at us. After realizing we were the victims in all of this, he attempted to usher me back inside of the room, but I would not move. The police were in the process of detaining the men as they waited for backup to arrive. There were 8 police officers that had arrived at the scene, with what I assumed was the entire cult sitting in a circle on the balcony. There was a noose hanging in the center of them, but no one was attached to it. The police were screaming at the men to get down on the floor, but the men were not listening. The moment I had exited the room, the men had all turned to face me in sync. They all had the same sinister smirk on their faces. They did not object or struggle when the police forced them to the ground, their stares remaining transfixed on me. The man who I had considered my best friend, the man who would have done absolutely anything to keep me safe, was laying motionless at the other side of the hallway. A police officer was desperately performing CPR to bring him back, but he remained there, lifeless. I searched around the room for my mother, but she was nowhere to be seen. I snapped out of my trance and frantically began to run towards my father. The police officer sorrowfully shook his head as I approached. I began pounding on my father's chest while sobbing uncontrollably, attempting to bring him back. It was worthless. He had passed long before the police had arrived. The police officer pulled me away to console me, and I gained some composure in an attempt to find my mother. Anger took over. I walked over to the men whose glances had followed me across to the other side of the room. I screamed at one of the men as I hit him over and over again, asking where my mother was. The police officers barely had control of the situation as it was. I continued to hit the man over and over, but he remained in silence, smirking at me as blood ran down his face. The other men did not attempt to help him, and he did not bother to defend himself. They all just continued to smile at me. A police officer finally pulled me away, but we both stumbled backwards. One of the men in the circle grabbed me and pulled me in close, whispering into my ear. He spoke like a child in broken English. I am paraphrasing what he said to me. Mother could not take us all with her. It is for the best. Soon we will have another blessing, as will you. We will all have another brother soon. Mother is patient, but she never forgets. She never gives in. She will still get what she wants. A police officer eventually pushed him back to the floor, pushing me away as he did. I fell backwards onto the wall. I began to sob uncontrollably, begging and pleading for them to tell me where my mother had been taken. The rest of the police force soon arrived, amongst them Officer Henderson. They removed the men from upstairs and brought them down into the police vans, as I sat next to my father, aimlessly stroking his hair, begging for him to return to me. We were escorted out of there soon after. As the police searched the remainder of the house and grounds, Officer Henderson was silent as he drove us over to my girlfriend's parents. I think he took some of the blame in all of this. The police constantly monitored the premises while we remained there. We did not stay there for more than a few days, as we did not want to put anyone else in danger. We were given new identities and moved to a completely different part of the UK. We have been here for a while now, and this will be my last account. We have removed ourselves from social media and made sure to never broadcast our location. The men that were arrested at the house were relatively young men. They had no identities and absolutely no records. They were ghosts. The men that were posing as police officers inside of the house and the officers that originally took us to the house have not been caught. The woman, who I now assume is behind a lot of this, has also not been caught. Officer Henderson did not mention much else about the case to us. He has updated us periodically, but has definitely held certain details back. I think he feels that we are as safe as we can be for now. My mother has not been found, and I am not sure that she ever will be. The only thing that he did tell me was that the men that were caught were of varying ages, and all had the intelligence of young children. They have not stopped crying for their mother. They have not been able to answer any questions, and he is not sure if they even know what they have done. He assumes that the mother was the woman that visited us on the final night. He also believes that this cult is not just local. He does not know how far this stretches. Things will never be the same now. We fear leaving the house or contacting friends and relatives. I am not sure if we will ever feel safe again. No one can protect us forever. I blame myself completely for the death of my father. If we had not involved him, if we had just gone somewhere else, if we had made different decisions, maybe he would still be alive. I believe my mother is still alive. I believe she will be alive until they no longer need her. I hope that one day she will be found alive and well, but as the days and weeks pass by, it seems more and more unlikely. There is a small part of me that hopes that she was sacrificed. It's better than the alternative. I cannot fathom the strength it would take to survive for 9 months with these people. I know that they will find us again. I know that we cannot run forever. They may already be aware of our location. I have no idea how many people are involved in this cult. I have no idea how much longer we can run and hide. I want it all to end. I do know, however, that we are not the only ones at risk. We are not special. This final account is to serve as a warning. If you feel like you are being watched, if you see anyone out of the ordinary, if you receive anything out of the ordinary, or if you come into contact with these people, do not brush it off. Do not stay in one place. Do not trust anyone. This cult is extremely dangerous. Once they latch onto you, they will never give in. I pray that none of you are their next victims. Story 2. My girlfriend is a psychopath, and she's ruining my life. I met her at a party my friend Matt organized last year. Although the party was big with lots of people there, she stood out from the crowd immediately. Red hair, blue eyes, full lips, voluptuous figure. She was mesmerizing in an otherworldly manner which I cannot explain. I couldn't take my eyes off her, and soon she noticed my voracious glances and returned them. At the time, I hadn't even thought about approaching her. With her amazing looks, she had a lot of wooers around her, but seemed bemused by every single one of them. That's why when I grabbed a beer and turned around to see her standing right in front of me, I was so startled, I almost spilled my beer all over myself. "Hi," she said with a curious smile, ignoring my clumsiness. "Hi back," I said, trying my best not to stare at her cleavage. "You're a friend of Matt's?" "I haven't seen you before." "I am." "My name's Jake." "Maria," she replied, and we shook hands. At the time, the only thing I could think was what in the whole hell was wrong with her, that she decided to talk to me of all people at the party. "You want a drink?" I gestured to the plethora of booze on the table. "No, I don't drink." "I will take that Coke Zero," though she jovially said, as she bent forward unnaturally to reach the Coke can on the table, making her breasts even more prominent in that position. I remember wondering at that point if she did that on purpose to tease me, or if she was completely oblivious to the sight she was displaying. My bet was on the first one, and it invigorated me to strike up a conversation with her further. "So, what about you?" "How do you know Matt?" I asked, my brain desperately trying to conjure up some smooth lines, but only sputtering out the most basic sentences. "He and I used to be neighbors when we were kids, and played together almost every day during summer. We just kind of stayed in touch over the years, as improbable as it sounds." "Wow. I can't believe he's never told me about you all these years." I tried to be more daring, the beer taking more control than I was. "Now, Matt and I used to hang out a lot more frequently before, but he never told me about Maria. He did have a lot of friends though, and it's not like we sat around talking about his friends all day. She smiled and took a sip of her Coke, maintaining eye contact with me the whole time. Just then, a new song started playing and Maria gasped with a grin on her face. "I love this song. Wanna dance?" she winked, gesturing with her head for me to follow. My testosterone was already out of control by then from being in the proximity of a woman of such appearance, so I didn't need to be asked twice. I grabbed her by the hand and took her to the middle of the room, among the other drunken guests. Maria and I danced for hours, which says a lot about me, because I absolutely hate dancing. I remember in my intoxicated state seeing Matt giving me a weird glance with his eyebrows raised when he saw me there with her. After a while, things got heated and Maria and I began making out and grinding on the dance floor. I continued drinking along the way, and with my lack of self-control over booze, I blacked out at some point. I woke up in the morning with a throbbing headache, the sunlight coming through the window blinding me. I grunted and opened my eyes with great difficulty, observing my surroundings. I was in the bedroom of my apartment. There was a note on the nightstand, written with almost perfect handwriting. "See you soon, Maria." There was a lipstick imprint in the shape of lips under that. I flipped the note over, hoping for a number or a way to contact her, but there was nothing else. I cursed loudly for not remembering anything about the fiery last night I probably had with Maria, or having a way to contact her back, but at the time my biggest concern was my throbbing head. I spent most of that day laying in bed, and at around 4 p.m. I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello," I answered, expecting a call from a marketing or insurance agency. "Hey Jake," a playful female voice resounded on the other side. Hi, I said, trying not to give away my confusion. "It's Maria." "Remember me?" she asked playfully again. "Maria, hi. Of course I remember you. How was the party for you?" "The party was okay, but after party was amazing," she giggled. I laughed awkwardly. "Say, did Matt give you my number?" I asked. "Oh, I got it myself. While you were sleeping, I used your phone to call myself." "Oh, okay." I wish I could say that this raised some red flags, but the part of me which was into Maria decided to ignore such a creepy fact. More so, I was glad she called me. "Hey Jake, do you want to go out somewhere tonight?" she asked. Out? Tonight I was taken aback by this, but it was still a pleasant surprise. "Yeah, sure. How about we go to a quieter place tonight?" "That's a great idea." I could hear the excitement in her voice over the Phone Boss Cafe, 8 p.m. "Sure. Do you want me to pick you up somewhere, or?" "No, it's okay. See you soon, Jakey. Can't wait." I dressed up fancier than last night and put on an expensive perfume to make up for the intoxicated state I was in at the party. Maria was already seated at a table in the restaurant, looking even more enthralling than last night. She wore a tight, fancy red dress that matched her hair and brought her bodily features to expression. I felt my temperature going up right away, and it wasn't from the restaurant's heating. She and I hit it off right pretty well from the start, and after just a few minutes of talking, I realized she wasn't just a pretty face and a hot body, but also a font of knowledge that possessed the intellect of someone who could put a scholar to shame. I honestly started to feel a bit intimidated by this point. She was a psychologist in high school who planned to start her own business, and in her spare time she enjoyed painting, joining book club meetings, and going to acting classes twice a week. And then there was me, a half-ambitious accountant, whose only goal was to make it to Friday so I could go drinking. She didn't seem to mind my lack of hobbies though, and was genuinely interested in everything I had to say, gleefully hanging on to every word I uttered. After dinner we went back to my place, and when things started getting heated, she stopped me. She seemed genuinely worried, so when I asked her what was wrong, she told me that she's not the kind of person to sleep around, but that she likes me and wants to try something more serious with me. Most of my thinking capabilities were by then drained from staring at her exposed breasts, but I used my remaining brain power to tell her I understand what she meant, and that the feeling was mutual. At that, She seemed relieved, and we took things further in the bedroom. Luckily, this time I remembered every single detail. We officially started dating after that, and things went smoothly for a while. We saw each other every day, and often she'd sleep over. Frankly, I was beginning to think that she was the one, and I had already started picturing our future together, even though we had been dating only for a month. And then one day, everything changed. We were on a date in Boss Cafe, and she was telling me about her day. I carefully listened and agreed with her that the 15-year-old girl from school that she was talking to was spoiled. My phone vibrated and I unlocked it. Oh crap. I forgot that I gotta meet up with Federica later, I said. Who? Maria asked, as she took a sip of her coffee. My friend Federica. She and I agreed to catch up this week. Excuse me, Maria's face contorted into a grimace of anger. I had never seen her make this facial expression, so I instantly assumed this was bad. Yeah, I mean, Federica and I have known each other over 10 years. So, it's not right for someone in a relationship to have any lady friends, Jake. I don't have any guy friends, either. What? Come on. Federica is like a sister to me. And I mean, you hang out with Matt too, right? No, I don't. I blocked him on all my social media when you and I started dating. Men and women can't be friends. There's always a chance for something more to happen between them. Are you serious? Look, I'm not forbidding you from hanging out with guys. It's perfectly normal to have friends of the opposite sex, as long as you're just friends. I don't agree with you, she crossed her arms, fuming. I'm sorry, Jake, but you're going to have to choose, me or her. Maria, come on, don't be like this. Federica is just a friend. I'm not going to cut off a friend I've known for 10 years over someone I've known for 1 month, so please don't make me choose. If you won't cut her off, then I want to be with you every time you hang out with her. No, I said sternly, you'll get to meet her, but I can't drag you to every. Before I managed to finish my sentence, Maria stood up and threw her coffee in my face. The nearby guests of the restaurant glanced in our direction as Maria stormed out, furiously stomping her feet. I wiped my face and shirt futilely with a napkin, trying to pretend like everything was okay. I asked for the check from the waiter, who tried to keep a straight face and politely excused myself out of there. I would probably not be going back there anytime soon. An hour later, I was at Federica's place, and we were catching up, talking about old times, when my phone buzzed. I unlocked it and saw that I got a message from Maria. It said, "How can you be so selfish?" I replied, "I'm sorry if I hurt you, but try to understand my side. We'll talk a bit later about it." I continued chatting with Federica when my phone buzzed again. It was Maria again. "No, we will not. I won't change my stance on this." "Is everything okay?" Federica asked, possibly noticing my frustrated facial expression. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, turning off my vibration and putting my phone in my pocket. I did my best to put my argument with Maria to the back of my mind and enjoy my time with Federica, but she could sense my frustration, so we agreed to meet again another time. When I arrived home, I pulled out my phone and loudly said, "What the fuck?" when I saw the countless notifications on my phone. I had missed calls and messages on every social media website where I was active. Every single notification was from Maria. I skimmed through them in horror, seeing new ones pop up along the way. The messages started accusatory, saying things like, "You fucking asshole. I can't believe you're so cruel. I bet you're fucking her right now, aren't you?" etc. Then they transitioned to guilt-tripping, saying things like, "I'm crying right now. I'll just swallow my sleeping pills to take my mind off you. I cannot believe you would hurt me like this," and so on. And then they started to change to rationalizing, telling me she loves me too much and only wants to protect me, that she's too afraid to lose me, etc. In between our messages, there were remarks like, "Hello," and "Are you there?" quickly followed by more of her rants. Something clicked in my mind and I realized right there and then that things wouldn't work out for us. This was too much of an issue to be pushed under the rug. I hated the idea of doing it this way, but I sent her a message. I think we should break up. She called me immediately, asking me why, with a quivering voice. I explained, and she began crying, begging me not to leave her, promising to change and even let me be friends with Federica. I told her that it wouldn't work, and she began guilt-tripping me again, telling me that she loved me and she was going to kill herself if I leave her. When I told her that those threats won't work, she became aggressive. The last sentence she screamed into the phone before hanging up was, "You'll regret leaving me, you bastard. I'll make your life a living hell. You're going to beg me to take you back." It was the most surreal experience I've had within the span of 4 hours. And although I really liked her, I couldn't go over this sort of thing. Her behavior reminded me of those posts which I used to see online about the cringy overweight guys with fedoras who orbit around women and incessantly hound their inboxes. If Maria got this psychotic over a visit with a long-time female friend, I didn't even want to think what she would do when we moved in together or got married. I assumed that she was the type to stalk her exes, so I preemptively blocked her on all media just to be on the safe side. Everything went fine for a while, and I even met another girl, a friend of Federica's. She and I went on a date, and everything was fine at first. She was super into me, and we were already making plans for our next date when she decided to add me on Facebook so that we can chat more easily. I told her my name, and she decided to check out my profile a little while we waited for our food to arrive. She was amused by my pictures of the food I cooked, as well as my workout videos, when all of a sudden her smile dropped and her mouth contorted into an expression that looked like she just ate a lemon. I asked her if everything was okay, and she uttered a weak, with a visibly forced smile. From that point, she avoided my gaze the entire time and seemed completely uninterested in the conversation. The date went on for about 20 minutes, when she said she just remembered something she needed to take care of and had to go, saying we'll be in touch. More perplexed than disappointed, I connected the dots that she may have seen something on my profile, which wasn't to her liking. But before I could finish that sentence, I got a call from my mom. "Hello," I asked. "Jake," she sounded distressed, which instantly put me on edge. "What is that picture you posted on Facebook? Aunt Amy had to see it. What were you thinking?" I was, of course, confused by this, because I had no idea what video she was talking about. I immediately logged in to see for myself what could have possibly caused such an eruptive reaction. And boy, was there something to be seen there. The most recent posts were normal, but when I scrolled down a little bit, I started to see occasional shares of weird links, videos and pictures, like furry porn and sexual artwork, which I don't even want to begin to describe. There was even a post where I apparently wrote something extremely racist and homophobic. The funny thing is that for each link or post I shared, there was a follow-up text of my own, which eerily looked like something I would write, with the typical emojis I use, etc. It made it less likely to other people that I was hacked, and more that I had a mental breakdown. What was even stranger was the fact that there were some likes and comments on it, but I never got notified. Upon closer investigation, I realized that the notifications had been turned off. I immediately made a post in which I apologized publicly to everyone who had to see such abominable things and informed them that I was hacked. The damage was done already though, and by then a lot of people had already booted me out of their friends list. I contemplated deleting my Facebook, but running away from it after such a disaster would only make me look guiltier. 2 days later at work, my boss called me into his office. I was expecting a promotion around that time, and everyone in the office already knew that I was the best candidate. Even the boss hinted at me getting the role, so it was pretty much a public secret by then. "How's it going?" Mike, I asked when I strode inside and sat in front of his desk. Michael stared at his computer screen with a grievous expression on his face. He furiously clicked for a minute or so, while I sat in silence, feeling like I was being judged for some reason. "Jake," he finally said, turning to me and crossing his fingers, "you've been a valuable asset to the company thus far." He stared at his hands while fidgeting with his fingers. "You were the perfect man for the promotion, were?" I thought to myself, starting to sweat bullets instantly. Mike looked up at me with the expression of a disappointed parent. He said, "That's why I don't understand why you'd do something like this. Why focus on small cash when you could have made it big. Mike, what are you talking about? What's going on? Mike opened his drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. He slammed them against the desk and said, "The client who you've been working with on the previous project contacted us and told us you were willing to sell him some sensitive information for a price." My eyes widened, my heart practically thudding against my chest at this point. The papers showed screenshots of my secret communication with the client, where I clearly offered to leak information in exchange for money. The papers also had proof that I did it, because the emails were apparently sent from the location of the office, from my computer. What is this? Mike, I'd never do such a thing. Give me a chance to at least explain, I tried to say, before Mike interrupted me. Jake, don't make this harder on yourself. Now, you can leave either with a severance package or without it, which already took a lot of strings to pull. Hell, you're lucky that I managed to convince the higher-ups not to press charges against you. The choice was clear here and there was no use arguing. They had strong evidence to go against my claim. I agreed to Mike's terms, and by the end of the day I was out of the office, followed by the contemptuous glances and hushed whispers of my coworkers. I wish that's where everything ended, but when I got home I had an even bigger surprise. I opened my front door to find my apartment completely ransacked. Furniture was ripped, with sponges strewn all over the place, dishes were smashed on the floor, the TV and other objects were overturned, etc. It looked like there was an earthquake there. I called the cops immediately, and they showed up within minutes. After a brief search, I realized that nothing of value was missing, and they found no signs of forced entry. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" one of the officers asked. I thought for a moment, and the idea occurred to me that Maria could have been responsible, but I had no clear evidence to assume she would go to such extreme lengths, despite being as crazy as she was. It did make sense that she would do it, though. She vowed to make my life a living hell, and the past few days have been a string of unexplained incidents. I was about to give the officer the name of a potential suspect when the other police officer emerged from the bathroom. "Turn around and put your hands behind your head," he said. "What? What's going on?" I asked. The officer raised a small transparent bag with little green lumps up to his face. "You're under arrest for marijuana possession," he said. "Sir, don't make this hard on yourself. We can do this in 2 ways. You don't want to be charged with resisting arrest." I complied, my brain spinning a million miles an hour. As they escorted me out of my apartment, my gaze fell on a tiny note in front of the entrance. A note with an all too familiar lipstick imprint on it. "See you soon, Maria." This couldn't be happening, I kept telling myself as I was put in the back of the cruiser and taken to the police station. It took a week until I had my court hearing and was granted bail of $3,000. It would have been a misdemeanor charge, but the amount of marijuana exceeded it just by a little, and I was sure that whoever framed me calculated it scrupulously. At the time, I didn't have such money, so I called Matt to help me out. I felt bad for calling him like this, especially given the fact that he and I only spoke once briefly since the party, but he was more than happy to help me. When he finally arrived to pick me up, he shook his head, but smiled. "That wasn't mine," I said. Matt laughed. "Yeah, innocent man, I get it. I totally don't have some on me right now," he winked. "I'm serious, Matt. I was set up by Maria." "Who?" "Your friend Maria. You know, the one who I hooked up with at the party and dated for a month." Matt frowned for a moment before snapping his fingers and saying, "Oh right, the redhead. That chick was hot, man. Too bad things didn't work for you two. Hey, would you mind giving me her number so I can try and charm her? I mean, you guys are through, so you don't mind, right?" I stared at Matt in bewilderment. Something was very wrong here, I said. "Nope. I thought she was your friend, man." My head started spinning again. Who the hell was this girl, and what did she want from me? How the hell did she manage to sneak into the party without anyone noticing, especially with her prominent features? I thanked Matt for everything he did and promised to pay him back as soon as I had the money. As soon as I got home, I unblocked Maria's number and texted her. "Well, are you done now, you fucking psycho? You embarrassed me in front of my friends and family, got me fired and arrested and ransacked my apartment. Leave me the fuck alone, you bitch. It felt good sending that text, although I wanted to say that to her face even more. Her reply came through in a matter of minutes, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me feel uneasy. See you soon, it simply said. I spent the next 2 days cleaning up my apartment and looking for a new job. It was inevitable that I would need to move out, especially now that I was jobless, so I wasn't too concerned with Maria finding me. One day during the week, I went for a walk in the park to clear my head and get my mind off things. It was a nice day, and the park was tranquil, with people walking their dogs or taking a stroll with their kids. I sat down on a bench, closed my eyes, and enjoyed the pleasant breeze and silence. "Hi, Jakey," I heard an all too familiar voice to my left. I jerked my head in the direction of the voice, and there she was, standing right in front of me, with a wide smile on her face. "Maria," I stood up, feeling my heart beginning to race faster. "What the hell do you want from me?" "What do you want?" "Nothing. I was in passing and just wanted to say hi." "Well, see you around," she said in a nonchalant way, waving her fingers at me before turning around. This made me mad. To ruin my life like that, and then just pretend like everything was okay, filled me with boiling rage. I stood up and grabbed her by her wrist violently. "Don't you walk away from me, you bitch." She turned around to face me, giving me a suspiciously seductive glance, before saying, "Careful, Jake, careful. There are people around here. And you wouldn't want the judge to receive a video of you violating your temporary restraining order, would you?" Her eyes widened and her smile dropped, expressing palpable fear on her face. She tried breaking free as she screamed, "Let me go. Please. Don't hurt me." I let her go instantly, as if being burnt. The nearby people glanced in our direction with confusion, and I could see some of them reaching for their phones, curiously observing the situation. "Restraining order? What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my distance from her. She smiled again, making me want to strangle her. The judge was so cooperative. When I came to him with tears in my eyes, and when I showed him all the texts of the threats you've been making towards me, he immediately took pity. She giggled and twirled her hair around her finger playfully, before saying, "You still have a chance to make it up to me. Despite causing me so much pain and suffering, I still love you, Jake. I'm willing to take you back." "You're fucking crazy," I said, and turned around. "Stop, Jake," she said so sternly that I felt compelled to turn back around and face her. She said, "Dib, you don't want to leave, trust me. Because if you do, you're going to be charged with rape." I was about to interject, but no words came out. She continued, "If I go to the judge and tell him you raped me, do you think they'll take my word for it?" She pursed her lips, staring at me. "What about if they happen to find evidence of my rape? Say, an extragenital injury? Say, your DNA? What do you think would happen then?" I opened my mouth, dumbfounded. I couldn't describe what I felt at that point. I was a mixture of scared and angry at the same time. I felt like I could stomp Maria's head over and over, until all that remained of her was a bloody mess. But she had me by the balls. She took a step closer and put her hand on my cheek. "Jakey," she said, "I told you that you would beg me to take you back. So, get on your knees and start begging." I looked around, futilely searching for a familiar face to help me. Most of the people were already gone by then, and it was only Maria and I, with an occasional passerby. I had no doubt that she was ready to do everything she mentioned in order to get what she wants. "Jakey, don't make me ask twice," she crossed her arms. I felt tears streaming down my face by this point, as I slowly lowered myself to my knees and looked up at Maria's stern face. "Forgive me," I said. "What was that?" "I can't hear you," she said, leaning in and looking like she could hardly contain her laughter. "Please forgive me." And she said, her face very close to mine now, her lips contorting into a conniving smile. "Please forgive me and take me back," I said, sobbing. "Stand up. Look at me. "Look at me, Jake," she said, and I obeyed immediately. "Do you love me?" she asked. "Yes," I said, moving my gaze away, too humiliated to look at her. "Hey." "I didn't say you could look away," she said. I looked back and she smiled. It was that same smile from the night when we met, a heartwarming illusion of a smile that could lure any man into Maria's deadly trap. "Do you promise to always love me and do as I ask, and never have any female friends again?" "I promise," I said. She hung her arms around my neck and kissed me. She then hugged me and whispered into my ear, "Shay, it's okay. I forgive you, Jakey. We're going to be so happy together." I met with Maria in our usual cafe the following day at her request. I didn't even try to make an excuse and dodge coming, because I knew she would find a way to blackmail me. When I arrived, she was already there, scrolling on her phone. She wore a cropped pink top and jeans, and upon seeing me, she smiled widely and stood up to meet me. She passionately kissed me and whispered, "I missed you, Jakey. Did you miss me?" "Yes," I answered like a docile animal, too afraid to hesitate. Had this been the time when we just started dating, I would have been absolutely stunned by her gorgeous appearance. But now, as I looked at her deceptive smile and dishonest eyes, I felt disgust. I could hardly even stomach the thought of being in her presence, let alone being intimate with her, but it had to be her way. "How was your day, sweetie?" she asked. "It was good." "I didn't really do anything special," I said, glancing around the place, trying to catch the attention of the waiter. "Aren't you going to ask me about my day?" she said, tapping her fingernails on the table, producing a hollow sound with each tap. I haven't been with her for a full minute, and I already managed to piss her off. How the hell was I going to survive a relationship with this psychopath? "Yes, I'm sorry." "How was your day, baby?" I smiled and asked, to which her tapping stopped. "Well, just another typical day at school, you know. I had one kid scheduled for a conversation, but he never showed up. I'll have to contact him to make sure he's okay though. I'm really worried about him since he's feeling depressed." She raised her eyebrows in a sorrowful manner. "You lying, two-faced bitch," was all I could think to myself as I nodded and agreed with her, encouraging her to leave the kid alone until he felt comfortable to talk about his situation. Normally I would have advised differently, but right now being depressed sounded way better than being near this lunatic. "So, are you looking for a new job?" she pompously asked, taking a sip of coffee. I stared at her for a moment in confusion, and when she saw that, she put down her mug and said, "You know, because you got fired from your old job, it's such a shame. You really seem to enjoy working there. But I believe you're going to make up for the mistake you made at your old job. I believe in you and will support you until the end, Jakey, because that's what good girlfriends do." She smiled and reached across the table, putting her hand on mine. I smiled back, holding within me the urge to shout at her. We spent another 20 or so agonizing minutes talking about random things when my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up to read the message and noticed Maria greedily glancing at the screen. When I saw who the message was from, I silently started praying that Maria didn't see it, but my hopes sank when she spoke up again. "Jake, I thought we've been through this already." When I looked at her, she had her arms crossed and was frowning at me. "What do you mean I played dumb, closing the message and putting the phone in my pocket?" "You know what I mean. We agreed that having friends of the opposite sex is not right for someone who is in a relationship. And last I checked, Federica was a girl." "Maria, please. Federica has always been a good friend of mine. I can't just ditch her after all these years. Jake, I'm trying to be supportive. I really am. But it's so hard to do so when you're constantly hurting me like this." Tears started welling in her eyes, and her voice started to quiver, gradually becoming louder. "I can't be supportive of it when all I can think of was that day when you left me to be with her. How am I supposed to believe that you wouldn't do it again?" She was practically screaming at this point, tears streaming down her face, much to the bewildered glances of the other guests. She buried her face in her hands and started sobbing. "Maria, Please stop." "No, I won't stop," she said between sobs, before slightly calming down and continuing, "If you won't do anything about it, then we'll just have to go our own ways, Jake. But I'm not sure what your bath would entail." She stood up, picked up her purse, and put it over her shoulder. "Maria, wait. I'll do whatever you want. Please," I said. She looked at me with hesitation, wiping the tears and ruined makeup off her face, before sitting down and leaning on the table. She said, "Call her now." "What?" "Call her and tell her never to contact you again." "Maria, call her, or I'm leaving." I glanced around the restaurant, realizing that most of the people were sneaking glances in our direction, moving their gazes away when they met with mine. Well, Maria's unrelenting gaze was on me so intently that I felt like it would burn a hole in my head. I pulled out my phone and dialed Federica's number with trembling hands. After 2 rings, she picked up. "Hey, Jay," she said jovially. "Hi, Federica," my somber greeting contrasted hers. "Is everything okay, Jake?" She could immediately sense that something was wrong. Of course she could. Even after a long time of not talking, she knew me better than I knew myself. "Jake, are you still there?" she asked, when I failed to respond. Maria incessantly stared at me, slowly tapping her fingernails on the table again. "We can't be friends anymore, Federica," I spat out as quickly as I could, feeling uncomfortable with the words. "What?" "Jake, I don't understand." "Don't ever call me again," I said, and hung up. Before she could respond, I put my phone in my lap and stared at it, as it started to ring with Federica's name on the display. "Block her," Maria sternly said, still staring at me with her piercing look, her lips stiffening into a thin line. I declined Federica's call and did as Maria asked. I also blocked her on all social media, and once it was done, I gently placed my phone on the table and looked Maria in the eye. Her expression had shifted entirely from an angry one to compassionate. She stared at me with what looked like pity as she put her hand on mine again and said, "I know this was hard, baby, but it was the only right thing to do. You only need me in your life, no one else. I will make you happy, I promise." She tightened the grip on my hand and I returned it, giving her a vague smile. A moment later, she pulled back and leaned in her chair as she said, "Now that we got that vermin out of the way, I wanted to talk more about a serious matter." Her face flashed with a wide grin as she cheerily said, "Jakey, I think I should move in with you." I opened my mouth to say something, but I frankly didn't know if I should object, find an excuse, or agree. "What do you think?" she said as she took another sip from her mug. "Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not such a good idea right now. I'm jobless after all, and when the landlord sees what you did to the apartment, I thought you'd be happy about us living together." "I would. I awkwardly said. "Good. Then it's settled. I'll bring my stuff around tomorrow." She took a sip of her coffee. "Oh, and please try to clean up the apartment. The last time I came to your place, it was a mess and I don't want to be welcomed with things that need cleaning." I smiled, imagining pummeling her over and over. "I'm so excited," Jakey, Maria exclaimed. Sure as shit, Maria was there the next day. I had started cleaning, and she was less than happy to see that the apartment was still a mess, despite the majority of it being taken care of. She was frustrated and started taking it out on me, calling me an incompetent half-man, but I ignored her remarks. This sort of life was not going to work. I had to find a way to turn the tables. Having Maria move in was agonizing. Not only did we spend a lot more time together, but I had to be careful about leaving my laptop unlocked, since I was sure she'd go snooping around. Living with her was utterly unpredictable, too. Some days she'd come back home in a great mood and would shower me with love and attention, while other days she'd be irritated, scolding me and shouting over anything I did wrong. As much as I hated any kind of contact with her, I preferred the first option. The only good thing that came out of this was the sex. I was a lot rougher with her than usually, And even though this was good for both my mental and sexual frustration, it was even better that Maria enjoyed it too, so she couldn't tell that it was my way of channeling anger. Or maybe she could, she just didn't care. Either way, the first few days of her moving in, I barely had any time to spend alone and think about things. But as the days went by and she mentally started exhausting me, I started to consider ways to end all of this. One day, we went to the movies and decided we'd grab dinner afterwards. While I was buying the tickets and popcorn, Maria sat in the back at a table drinking soda. "Jake, is that you?" the young lady who worked there asked. I immediately recognized her as Helena, my high school classmate. "Helena, hi, so good to see you," I smiled. "I didn't realize you were back in town." "Yeah, just working in between before I got back on the next cruise." She chuckled. "Well, good for you. How is working on a cruise ship, anyway?" "Great. Lots of work, but I like it. Plus, it really helps because my little sister needs to have college funded, and since our parents are gone," she shrugged. "I'm so sorry to hear that. What about you? Is that your girlfriend back there?" She shot Maria a glance and smiled. "Ah, yeah," I said, dodging a lengthier discussion about my psycho girlfriend. "Hey, I'd love to talk more, but I got other people waiting here. So how about we catch up soon?" she asked. I nodded, took my popcorn, and went back. I noticed Maria staring in my direction intently with a serious expression on her face. "You sure took your time talking to that girl," she said. "That's Helena. She and I went to high school." I said. "She actually works as a waitress on a cruise ship, but takes a break between tours." "Sounds boring," Maria said, while staring at her phone. "Yeah, but it pays well. She wants to pay for her sister's college. Whatever. Can we go see the movie now?" I sensed Maria's aggression, since she was rarely subtle when she got angry. I knew we would have a problem with this later, and unsurprisingly, while we were in the restaurant eating dinner, Maria spoke up after being quiet for over an hour. "Jakey, do you love me?" "Of course I love you, Maria," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "And are you planning on hurting me in any way?" she asked, ignoring my hand. I brought my hand back and frowned, saying, "What? No, what would you say something like that?" "All right, good," she said as she took a bite of her food, "because if something were to ever happen to me, it would be a bad thing. For you, I mean. And I really can't stand the thought of you getting hurt, baby." I pretended to pay attention to the content on my plate while slicing my steak. I chose not to respond, and we spent the remainder of the dinner in silence. I had a horrible gut feeling the whole night and the following morning when Maria left for work, but I couldn't really tell why. It just kept nagging at me, warning me about something. Maria came home later than usually that day and was in an unexpectedly good mood. I tried to stay on her good side for the remainder of the night. The next morning, I almost threw up my breakfast when I read the news. Movie theater employee found dead. There was a picture of Helena on the headline. Although the details were not disclosed, it was stated in the article that Helena had been found dead near her apartment and that the police are actively searching for the killer. My first thought was, it must have been Maria, who else? But was she really capable of doing such a thing? Was she really going to such extreme lengths with her jealousy that she would kill anyone who even made mere small talk with me, even if it was a high school friend? Tears welled up in my eyes when I thought of Helena's younger sister, who was already without her parents and now lost her sister. It was really the stakes had been raised, and I had to up the ante myself if I wanted to have even a slight chance of making it out of this hell of a relationship. I spent the following days in cafes, pretending to look for work, while actually devising a plan to get Maria off my back. She was obviously smart and thought this through to the end, step by step. I knew that the only way for me to compete in any way was to play her game. But how could I do such a thing? I didn't have the mind of a psychopath. I didn't even know where to begin to set her up. The one thing I could do was bide my time and build trust with her, until she fell into a false sense of security. But what then? I could use a recorder to try and get her to confess everything, but my recording in court would be weak at best, against her DNA proof or whatever else she had in store. I spent hours every day planning and came up with nothing, so I'd go home and wallow in my self-pity. This one day I came a little earlier from the cafe, around 2 p.m. and Maria still wasn't home, since she usually doesn't arrive until about 4. I was about to make lunch when I heard the doorbell ring. I opened it and my eyes widened when I saw who was standing in front of me. "Hi, Jake," Federica grinned shyly. "Federica, what are you doing here? I told you not to contact me again. Jake, you need to talk to me. What is going on?" "Listen, you need to leave right now," I urged her. "Jake, we've known each other long enough for me to know when you're in serious trouble. I'm not going until you tell me what's going on." I hesitated for a moment, afraid that Maria may be lurking right around the corner. Eventually, I gestured for her to come on in. She complied and we went into the living room. She stopped in the middle of the room and spun around to face me, with a look of judgment on her face. "So, what is it?" she asked. I sighed and looked down, shaking my head. "I really can't talk about it." "Hey, look at me." She took a step forward and put her hand on my cheek. The gesture disgusted me, as it painfully reminded me of something Maria would do. We've known each other for years, and we've been through hell and high water. "Whatever this is, I'll help you. I promise," she said. I sighed once more and looked her in the eye. I really needed to tell someone. I've been bottling it up for so long. "It's Maria," I said. "What about her?" She stepped back and looked at me curiously. "She's blackmailing me. She's got evidence against me for crimes I didn't even commit. I mean, geez, she framed me and got me arrested a while back for drug possession. The girl's a psycho." "Jesus," Federica said, now staring at me with wide eyes. "I have to do everything she tells me." I shrugged. "Well, Jake, we can't just sit on it and let her have her own way. We have to find a way to." Federica started, and her eyes trailed behind me, growing even wider. "Have to find a way to." What a female voice came from behind me. I spun around and there stood my girlfriend. She had a disturbing grin on her face stretched from ear to ear, and she stared directly at Federica, with her shoulders tense. "Jakey, what is she doing here?" Maria asked through her grin, turning her gaze towards me. "Maria, I can explain." "Federica had nothing to do with this," I said, holding out my hand in a stop sign. Just then, my eyes fell on a glint in Maria's hand. She was holding a knife. "Maria, baby, let's just calm down here." "All right." I stepped back in front of Federica. Maria took a daunting step forward, still grinning like a crazy person. As she did so, her step turned into a walk. "I told you to cut all ties with her, Jake." "Hey, Jake and I are leaving," Federica said, as she stood next to me and were calling the police. Maria raised the knife and rushed at Federica while screaming. She fell on top of her, knocking over the coffee table and the decorations on top of it. "Maria, stop!" I rushed and grabbed her from behind. She swung her knife and cut my forearm, making me recoil in pain. As I did so, I tripped on something and fell, hitting my head on the wall in the process. My vision got blurry and I struggled to regain my composure. Through my blurred vision, I saw that Federica and Maria thrashed against each other, both girls screaming, and then it suddenly stopped. Federica gasped loudly in horror, and it took me a moment that the knife had made its way into her chest. "I told you to leave him alone. He's mine." "Mine." "Mine." With each sentence, Maria drove the blade into Federica's stomach, each new stab spraying blood all over the place. "Maria, no," I shouted, slowly propping myself and trying to stand up, but losing balance. Federica desperately tried to hold Maria back, but her strength was waning with each stab, and in a matter of seconds, she stopped resisting altogether. Her arms fell limply next to her body, and her head turned in my direction, her eyes staring vacantly as blood slid from her mouth. That didn't stop Maria, though, as she continued stabbing over and over with screams, making Federica's now lifeless body twitch at each stab I rushed to Maria and tackled her. She screamed hysterically, demanding that I let her go so that she can finish the whore. Stop. Just stop. God damn it, I shouted, and she seemed to break out of her hysteria, ceasing all struggle and staring at me while panting. I took the knife from her limp hand and stood up, turning to face Federica. It was even worse than I assumed. My friend had so many stab wounds that it was impossible to even count, some of them even going into her neck. A large pool of blood already formed around her body. I grabbed my head with both hands, panic overtaking me. Oh God. Oh God, no, I said over and over. Look what you did, Jake, Maria said in a calm tone. I turned to face her and saw her covered in blood from head to toe. She had a menacing look in her eye as she stared directly at me. Look where your selfishness got your friend. This is your fault. Why did you make me do it, Jake? Why? She became hysterical again, her mad look turning into a desperate one as she started crying. We have to go to the police, I said, panting myself. Oh, really? Maria suddenly stopped sobbing. Your fingerprints are on that knife, and you're covered in blood, Jake. If you go now, there's going to be enough evidence to convict you for life. Marijuana possession, then breaking your temporary restraining order, raping me, and now killing your friend. You really think it's a good idea to go to the police, you stupid fucking idiot? Ha! I looked at the knife, and then at Federica's lifeless body once more. Tears formed in my eyes at the sight of my best friend being gone in an instant, just like that. Well, Jake, Maria demanded, if you want, I can call the police. I can easily pretend to cry. She buried her face in her hands and said while weeping, It was horrible, officer. I tried to stop him, but he pushed me away and just continued stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. He has hit me before and I was too afraid to leave, because I didn't know what he was capable of. She sobbed violently for a moment, before stopping and looking up at me with a satisfied grin on her face. So, what do you want to do, Jakey? She asked calmly. I closed my eyes and dropped the knife. The rest of the day was a blur. Maria and I spent a long time cleaning the apartment, until it was seemingly spotless. I left the living room at one point to wash my hands, and when I came back, the knife was gone. It was foolish of me to leave it with her, because now she just had extra evidence to use against me. As for Federica, Maria took care of her. She carried the dead body into the bathroom and brought a hacksaw. After what felt like hours of listening to agonizing hacking and snapping, Maria left the apartment with a few full trash bags and was gone for hours. I was pretty much on autopilot by then, just cleaning the remainder of the mess. When Maria came back, she hugged me and said, Shay, everything will be all right, Jakey. We'll get through this. We only need each other. Why don't you sit down and relax? I complied and slumped onto the sofa, exhausted physically and mentally. I threw my head backwards and closed my eyes, while Maria sat on the floor next to me, stroking my hand gently. I was so tired. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Jakey, she said. I know you love me, but I still have to punish you. I felt unimaginably sharp, burning pain on my hand, and I screamed, instantly opening my eyes and pulling away from Maria. What I saw made me scream even more, not so much in pain, but in terror. The little finger on my left hand was missing, blood running from the stump. I looked at Maria and saw her holding my bloodied finger in one hand, and in the other, a pair of kitchen shears stained with blood. I stood up, holding my hand, the pain only now starting to fully get to me. What did you do? I shouted, taking a step back. Jake, don't move. You'll get blood everywhere again, and we just finished cleaning. Call an ambulance. I was in full-blown panic by now, but Maria seemed unfazed by the whole situation. You knew this was going to happen, she said calmly. I told you to cease all contact with Federica, but you wouldn't listen. We need to call an ambulance, I said, panting and already covered in blood, all the way down to my elbows. They might still be able to reattach it. Maria seemed to get pissed off even more at this, but a moment later she shrugged and said, Okay, Jake, you're right. Maybe they can reattach it. Go and take it there. She opened the window and chucked my finger out, much to my horror. She sat down on the sofa and pulled her cell phone out of her pocket, as if nothing happened. So I took that opportunity to run outside and look for my missing finger. After an hour of unsuccessful searching, I started to get dizzy and decided to visit the hospital instead. The whole time while I was being treated by the doctors, my desperation was turning into hot boiling anger. I was beyond mad and wanted revenge. I wanted revenge for Federica, for Helena, for my finger. If there was one thing Maria had that could be used against her, it was her short temper. I had to use it to my advantage, and an idea started to clearly form in my mind. We were at home, eating dinner. I clumsily fumbled with my fork, trying to hold it steadily with my mutilated hand. Getting used to living without a little finger may not seem like a big deal, but it impacts your life more than you'd think. Not to mention that your grip becomes a lot weaker without the finger. I was going through bouts of depression daily, but I kept my eyes on one thing: destroying Maria. It fueled me and motivated me to continue living until she was either dead or in prison. And whichever one it was, it would happen tonight. So, I have something to tell you, she said, as she took a bite of her food. Oh yeah, what is it? I asked, staring at my plate. She put down her fork and knife and inhaled deeply. She said, I know you're probably not ready for this, but what? I asked, getting a little impatient. My initial thought was that she would demand to get married. I think I may be pregnant, she said, awaiting my response. I swallowed, trying not to show any distress. She was fucking with me, I was sure of it. Did she sense what I was about to do? I couldn't let her fuck with my head. Well, that's too bad, I said, taking another bite of my food, as if she had just told me the most mundane thing ever. I looked up at her, and her expression of curiosity turned into a frown. Excuse me, she asked with a raised tone. Yeah, it's a shame, because I have something to tell you. Too, I laid down my silverware and said, looking her in the eye, I met a girl. She stood up, knocking over the chair she was sitting on, and said, You what? Who is she? Maria, calm down. Getting hysterical won't help here. What do you mean, calm down? Tell me the name of the girl so I can kill her. You mean like you killed Federica and Helena? I picked up my silverware once more and took another bite of my food. You'd think I didn't know about that. You killed an innocent woman just because she happened to talk to me while I was buying popcorn. She was working to put her little sister through college, you murdering bitch. I raised my tone at the last sentence, feeling the rage taking me over once more. Maria looked at me with wide eyes before continuing. They deserve to die. And I'll do it to every woman that comes close to you. You're mine, Jake. I know, I calmly sighed, I know. That's why on the night you killed Federica, I went to the police. Her eyes widened even more, but I continued. I told them everything. About how you blackmailed me with false accusations of rape, how you killed Federica and probably Helena, and how you cut off my finger. They're listening to us right now. I unbuttoned my shirt and revealed the wires which the police officers have attached to me. The door burst open with a loud bang, and armed officers rushed inside. Freeze. Get on the ground and put your hands behind your head, they shouted. Maria spun around to look at them, and then faced me with a glint of such anger and hatred that it actually made me feel palpable fear. She grabbed the knife and overturned the table with a loud scream. I am warning you to stop, one of the cops shouted, but Maria ignored them. She ran right at me, and as she was about to stab me, I jumped on the ground and covered my head, and a series of loud bangs filled the air with ear-splitting amplitude. Cease fire, one of the officers shouted, and I dared to look up. Maria was on the ground next to me, strewn sideways, riddled with bullets. Her eyes were wide and her mouth agape as blood drooled out. You promised, she barely managed to utter before letting out a gasp and ceasing all movement entirely. Hey, you okay? The police officers helped me up, and the rest of the night was a blur of being interrogated in the police station. The night I went to the station, I told them about everything, and even though I was initially a suspect, they wanted to kill two birds with one stone. so I agreed to cooperate and help them convict Maria. They wired me and monitored me closely in the following days. The officers got enough evidence from the recording to confirm everything I said was true and let me go. The autopsy performed on Maria revealed that she was indeed pregnant, but I felt no pity for that fucking baby. For a while, I expected some evidence to turn up in the police station which would accuse me of rape, like Maria swore. But that never happened, which got me to the conclusion that she was probably bluffing the whole time. I still have PTSD to this day, and often wake up seeing Maria with a knife or kitchen shears standing over my bed. I stopped dating too, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to get back into it. With the immense guilt I felt for allowing Federica and Helena to die, I turned to the bottle and stopped looking for a job altogether. One thing is for sure. Maria is gone, but I'll never be the same again. Story 3. My long-distance girlfriend wanted to video call me, and I don't think there will be another. About a year ago, I joined a Japanese culture appreciation club in my college as a person who had a love for the culture. I was assigned to show some traveling students the sights around the country, and that's how I met my girlfriend, Misaki. She was friendly and very eager to befriend me when we first met, and we kept in touch long enough for us to decide to test the waters a little. We kept video chatting and texting each other to maintain our relationship, and so far it has been working out for us. The first part may sound like digressing on my part, but I needed to get this out of the way because of what has been happening between us for the past week. So for starters, I managed to catch the dreaded coronavirus, so I had been keeping myself quarantined in my apartment until I got better. I've kept in touch with my family and friends, and reassuring them that I am fine and I will recover from it. Misaki was obviously one of them, and aside from my parents, she's been checking up on me the most. But then it got weird. Anyone who's ever known me for quite a long time knows I tend to go to bed around 9 p.m. Well, imagine my surprise to hear a ringtone at 11 p.m. I groan, still feeling weak from the sickness. I check who the hell was calling me at this time. Imagine my surprise to see Misaki's name on the caller screen. I answer it, putting the phone on loudspeaker. "Hello," I spoke out. "Lawrence," she called out in a heavily accented voice. "Hi." "Misa-chan, why are you calling me at this time?" I asked, a bit annoyed, but I did not want to shun her immediately. "EHA, can we video chat please?" Misaki asked, though I silently groaned to myself. "Can't this wait until tomorrow? Please. It's really important," Misaki pleaded, and I did eventually relent since this did sound very urgent. I booted up my laptop and launched the messaging app, immediately entering video chat mode to see Misaki already at the computer. "So what is it?" I yawned as she seemed rather pensive about something. "I want to teach you to make an ofuda." Ofuda being those protective talismans hung around the house in Japan for protection of the household. It was really suspicious since I never even heard of a daiwai ofuda, which as far as I can recall, is about the equivalent of making holy water from a faucet. Now I asked. I had to stay awake for this crap. Apologies for the bluntness. Is this really urgent? Please. I know it's a bother, but please do it with me, Misaki pleaded. I was sleepy and sick, but I could have caught a hint of desperation in her voice. I sighed and nodded, being compliant, and hoping this was something good. Misaki sighed in relief. "Okay, you won't regret this." She sighed in relief, as she then took some materials and showed them to me. "You need brush pen and Japanese paper." Misaki showed to me the tools I needed. "You still have art materials I mailed you?" "Yes," I groaned as I took them out from under my bed. "Okay, good. Now I want you to choose from any of these ofuda and write their character down on your piece of paper," she instructed, though she seemed to be in a bit of a rush. It was only 11:30 p.m., so I wasn't sure what the hurry was. "If you're in a hurry, we could." No, it's fine. Just pick one," Misaki said, irritated, though she really wasn't in any place to be irritated since she woke me up for this. But I chose one and showed it to her. "Okay, good. Now copy the characters onto your paper." I did as told, though my penmanship wasn't exactly the best, since I was an amateur at drawing characters, not to mention very sleepy and very sick. I replicated it as best as I could and then showed it to her. She nodded at that, audibly panting as I showed it to her. She still looked like she was in a hurry, but as if someone's life depended on it. "Okay, now do you have any holy items with you?" Misaki asked. "I have some holy water and salt," I think I yawned. It was 11:45. "Oh, okay. Sprinkle them onto your paper and say a shorter prayer. Are you sure? It's not Japanese. Just do it please," Misaki begged me again as I relented yet again, taking the water and the salt from the altar and then sprinkling them over my crudely made Ofuda, muttering a Hail Mary and a Glory Be. Not that I really believed in those, but those were the only prayers I knew. I wasn't sure what all this was for anyway, but if it made her happy, then I could keep this up a bit longer. "Okay, I'm done. Hang it on your window," Misaki instructed as I did just that, hanging the Ofuda on the curtains and then returning to my laptop. It was 11:55 by the time we finished. Misaki sighed as she looked at the clock behind her. She seemed rather exhausted by this herself, despite having to bother me for it. "Are you okay, Misaki?" I asked, though Misaki broke into soft sobs the moment I asked that. "I'm sorry about this. I'm just trying to save your life," Misaki broke down, though I still failed to understand what she meant. "There wasn't much time to explain to you, but please survive." Video freezes and gets cut off. I look at the clock, 12 a.m. I assume it was just an internet failure, since you never could trust these companies anyway. I close my laptop and immediately go to bed. Though as soon as I close my eyes, I can hear a soft tapping on my window. I ignored it for a short period of time, but the incessant tapping kept me from fully falling asleep despite my condition. I sat up from the bed, unable to sleep with that tapping on my window. I glanced at my poorly made Ofuda to see that the bottom portion of the paper was slowly turning black, and from the tiniest gap in the curtains, I could see wide bloodshot eyes staring right into my room. As soon as I saw those eyes staring into my room, I immediately couldn't sleep knowing whatever thing was out there trying to get in. I sat staring at the window, the maddening tapping still ongoing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Not that I had much chance to contemplate that when I heard a knock on my door, the same monotonous rhythm as the tapping on my window. Something clearly was pulling all the stops to try and get to me. But even when I had locked it, the door seemed to be unlocking on its own, and the second latch on top of it was magically coming loose. I was not waiting for that door to open. I gulped as I looked at some of my spare Japanese paper. I barricaded the door with my table and got to work on another Ofuda, my hands shaking. I barely come up with one as I saw the door begin to open. I sprinkled salt on it and said a short prayer, this time to Buddha, because I was going to take any help I was going to get at this point, and then I hurriedly hung it on the doorknob. Just in time, since I saw a few gray fingers creep and past the small gap in the door. I was not sure it was doing anything, but the fact that I heard an unearthly screech from the other side and heard the knocking transform into hard pounding on the door meant that I probably either successfully protected myself or did something to piss it off, maybe both. I stayed in dead center as the cacophony of thuds and taps kept my heart pounding. For the first time, I had no idea what to do. I thought of contacting Misaki again, but my laptop refused to connect. I jumped into bed and under the covers and cowered, enduring the noises. I peeked out to see my Ofuda about halfway into becoming completely black. I looked at the clock. It was only 2 a.m. I had 4 hours until sunrise. I had to survive this. But hearing this while incredibly tired and sick was maddening. I wasn't sure if the thing was intentionally doing this, but every now and then it would go quiet. And when I would start to doze off, the pounding would continue and I'd get rudely awakened. I looked at my Ofuda, which was almost completely consumed in blackness. It was 5 a.m. and I saw the orange in the horizon. The things outside screeched loudly as the nightmare was almost over. The Ofuda had been used up and the monsters had free reign of entering. Not that it mattered, however, as dawn arrived, and whatever preyed on me had left me alone. Sleep deprived and exhausted, I collapsed onto my bed, sleeping for nearly the entire morning until I was rudely awakened by a ringtone. I growl as I get off the bed to see that it was Misaki calling me. I quickly answer it. "Lawrence, "Are you okay?" Misaki called as I sighed and replied, "Yes, I am. And you need to explain what the hell just happened." "Yes. Sorry, video chat with me." "I'll say everything," Misaki replied, knowing she had a lot to tell me. I boot up my laptop, and though I'm still sick and sleepy, I listened as intently as I could to her story. After about an hour or so of explaining, I think I got the gist of what was happening. Misaki's family suffers from a curse that their daughters will never find a husband. It was an old family tale of a father who murdered his daughter named Ayaka for attempting to elope with a lover he did not approve of. With her dying breath, Ayaka cursed the family such that her vengeful spirit will come and claim the lives of anyone who would court the daughters of the family, lest they were willing to make a great sacrifice to save them. Of course, this was all very hard to believe, but considering what I had been through, it was the least of my problems. Why didn't she tell me? She does realize that she put my life on the line for being romantically involved with her. A flurry of questions raced through my mind as I felt dread and anger at this situation. I had been tempted to bring it all out on her, but I tried my best to keep calm and let her explain things first. "Why didn't you tell me this?" I asked Misaki, who was sniffling and sobbing from the other side. "I was selfish. When you proposed that we be more than friends, I thought of telling you, but I also wanted to know what it felt like to have someone care for me as much as you did." Misaki choked up as I could tell that the guilt of condemning me to this fate was overwhelming her. "I never believed in this curse until I received a fortune yesterday that you would die tonight, so I did what I could to help ward the spirit. But I've been only delaying the inevitable." I let her cry it all out as I still felt betrayed and angered by what she'd done. At this point, any wise boyfriend would have cut ties and hopefully escaped from the spirit's wrath. I was so angry at this, at being lied to, and her withholding the fact that I was going to die merely because I wanted to be more involved in her life. But for all the irritation and fear I felt, I couldn't muster up the anger against her. Despite the desperation I felt, compassion ruled in my heart. I didn't know what it was like to have to condemn someone I loved to be taken by a vengeful spirit, or be forced to become lonely for most of my life out of fear that whoever I loved would die. Regardless, I still resented being lied to as I adjusted myself in my seat. "I have to go," I said abruptly. I didn't hate her, nor did I resent her, but I didn't want to see her at the moment. "No, wait," Misaki clutched the screen from the other side, knowing full well what I was going to do. "Don't leave." "I'm sorry, Misaki, but I need some time alone," I said before exploding into a fit of coughs. "See you." Laura, the video gets cut off. I didn't even feel like eating, not that it mattered anyway. Any more attempts to ward off this curse would just end with more stressfully sleepless nights and endless noises. If I was going out on my own terms. I wait until night and take down all holy symbols from the openings. I open the windows to give whatever was coming in an easy entrance, and I would be sitting right in front of it to accept my timely death. In that span of time, I received endless calls and texts from Misaki, who said a flurry of things from "I'm sorry" to "I can fix this." I didn't want to listen to her now. She brought this upon me and I was going to take it as graciously as I could. Before midnight approached, I sent a goodbye text to all my loved ones, vague enough that it could be interpreted as a goodnight text but can suffice as my last words as well. As I scrolled through my messages, I hit Misaki, who I didn't even think about texting during this span of time. I still felt hurt and betrayed from before, but it felt wrong to not send one to her, especially when I still felt something for her. So I decided to make a voicemail just for her. "Misaki, you lied to me and condemned me to death. I should be furious, yet I can't find it in me to be angry at you. Funny how love works. Well, one positive thing that I could get out of this is the fact that if this ghost is really after me, and that means you did love me. And even if you lied to me and have been acting selfish this whole time, it still makes me happy to know that it was true." I end the voicemail and send it. If I was going to wake up tomorrow, I'd probably think it was cringy as shit, but may as well do things without regrets before I die. I wait until midnight, sitting in front of the window in deep, contemplative silence. As soon as the clock struck 12, I could see a hand crawling in through the window, and then the head of the lady, and then her entire grossly disfigured body come into my room. I was shaking in my seat, shivering in fear, as I wondered in my last moments what this thing was going to do to me. Instead, however, she extends a hand and opens it, showing a glowing blue flower that extended from her hand. It looked a bit like a forget-me-not. I raised a shaking hand and took the flower from the disfigured spirit, who simply whispered, "Someone holds much love for you," the spirit announced in a raspy voice before crawling backwards and disappearing into the night. As I sat there, dumbfounded at what happened and wondering what it exactly meant for me. And for Misaki. Today has been the most emotionally exhausting day ever, and I am not sure where to begin with it. Well, to start where I last left off, I had somehow survived an encounter with what I presumed to be the vengeful spirit that cursed Misaki's family. I noticed as well that my cough was suddenly gone. I was not sure what to do at this point, but the ringing of my phone disrupted my shock as I realized that I had been still getting messages. I looked at my phone to realize that Misaki had sent me one last message a few minutes before midnight. It was a video of her, crying in the darkness, as I felt reluctant to play it. I steeled myself and watched the video. Misaki paced around the room a bit, crying to herself a bit as she seemed heavily burdened by what she was about to do. She then approached the camera, still crying but managing to compose herself to begin speaking. "Lawrence, I don't know if you're watching this, then if you are. Then my sacrifice worked, and your life is spared," Misaki said as she clutched her left arm. My eyes widened as I saw her become progressively pale. I said that the curse could be lifted with a great sacrifice, and I offered what I could, just so that you'd live. Misaki tried to hide the physical pain that was clear on her face as I saw her glance every now and then at her arm, as I could already tell the implications of what she had done. I saw tears roll down her face as she tried to muster a smile at me. "I'm sorry I lied to you and put your life in danger. I never wanted any of this to happen to us. I received your voice mail, and I wanted to say, knowing that you were happy with my love. Those were the best words I could hear." I panicked as her voice became progressively faint, her eyes losing their light, and the video cut off right there. No, this wasn't happening. I didn't want this. I would have gladly died 1,000 times over by whatever abomination than have this. I panicked. I needed to be there for her. I rushed over to book a ticket to Japan, but realized the country had been on lockdown, and thus any flights to Japan would be delayed until April. I smashed my table in frustration. I despised how helpless I was in this situation. I started throwing things and kicking them around. I was so angry, but my fit of rage was interrupted by the same disfigured entity, sitting on my window. I snarl and grit my teeth. Even ghosts at this point didn't fucking scare me. It was this fucking thing's fault that Misaki had to do this. If she was coming back for another round, I was more than happy to oblige. But instead, it pointed a finger towards the wall behind me. I turned to see a weird vision of what looked to be Misaki's room, with Misaki bleeding out on the floor. I looked back at the entity, her bloodshot eyes looking right into mine, as if threatening me to go inside. I swallowed my saliva and walked towards the vision, suddenly finding myself in Misaki's room. I immediately come to her side as I immediately tried to inspect what was wrong with her. I followed the bleeding towards her forearm, where she had carved symbols on her arm, before crossing a line over it. I tried to stop the bleeding, but there was so much blood on the floor. I feared that I was too late to save her. I listened for a pulse, but I heard nothing as I hung my head, whilst cradling her in my arms. This wasn't fair. I knew it was her fault, and thus it had been her responsibility to fix it, but it shouldn't have turned out like this. I should have been the one who died, not her. I didn't want her to die for my sake. I choked on my own tears as I tried to contain the despair I felt. I didn't know what I could do now. I closed my eyes and let myself sob over her body. Yet, as I kept my eyes closed, I felt soft, warm hands touch and caress my face. As soon as I open my eyes, I feel soft lips pressing against mine briefly. I looked down and see Misaki, barely conscious but thankfully alive. I couldn't believe it. She was dead minutes before. Though I looked and saw the forget-me-not that I received, having found itself placed on Misaki's chest. Did the flower save her? I looked to Misaki, who was just as surprised as I was. You're alive. You're here. Dare. As soon as we heard those words spoken in unison, we laughed together for a bit before sharing another kiss. With all the supernatural and fatal tension finally gone, the tension between us had dissipated, and somehow we both saw fit to laugh at our current predicament. Now that it was all over, we could finally collapse for a rest. I carried Misaki onto her bed and let her have her well-deserved rest after all these scares of death and possession. But as I let her down, she refuses to let go, smiling at me, clearly inviting me to share it with her. A little flustered, I relented and stayed by her side until we both had our needed rests. Though that still did not prepare me for the shock that came from the following morning. When I woke up, I found Misaki packing many of her things into a huge bag, as if she were getting ready to travel. I watched her get her money ready, her clothes, her belongings, before she finally finished. She noticed that I was awake and questioning what she was currently doing. She gave me a soft smile and said, "I'll explain this over some coffee." You what I asked in absolute disbelief. I knew Misaki made her sacrifices, but I never expected to this degree. Yes, it was the only way. I'm afraid Misaki admitted, though she wasn't as bothered by it. She showed me her arm and the scars of the carvings she made. On record, Misaki Sato died from suicide at 2 a.m. in her apartment. We both looked at the television to see the gruesome scene of Misaki's suicide, the same horrific scene that I saw the night before. So what? Are you then, I wondered, touching her to see if she was intangible like some sort of ghost? I'm still human. Don't worry, Misaki giggled at my attempts to identify her. But I am essentially nameless now. No identity, no root. But why, I asked, raising an eyebrow. The terms of this curse were still very unreasonable. Well, yesterday I was rushing to find solutions to the problem, but a lot of my family from my father's side, where the curse came from, suggested I just let you die. But I did some digging and found an aunt that looked familiar yet was claimed to be dead, Misaki explained. Within the day, I managed to track her down to a residence where she lived under another name. She admitted to being a part of my family, but somehow spared her husband from the curse's wrath, to escape the curse. She appeased the spirit by shedding her family name and the bonds attached, so her daughters themselves are not cursed by the vengeful spirit. I see, and you did the same by etching your father's surname on your arm, and then wiping it, I asked, to which she nodded. Yes, Ayaka is a vengeful spirit, but she is also a guardian of Elipers, Misaki smiled while taking my hand, though the pure cheesiness of this situation made me feel very flustered. And you are okay with this? Well, there's no going back now, is there? Misaki smiled as I sighed and shook my head. This was crazy. I was condemned to die. Now I was obligated to take care of her. Not that I hated it. I loved it, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be worth what she had willingly sacrificed. She was without name and had nowhere to go. What could someone like me offer her? But now was not the time to doubt. I had to rise up to the challenge, for her sake. I'll try my best, I nodded my head, to which Misaki excitedly clapped and gave me a hug, to which I returned affectionately. We both left the coffee shop to suddenly find ourselves back in my apartment, likely courtesy of the spirit. Misaki excitedly went into my bedroom and began unpacking, but things were not that simple, since she still needed to get a visa, as well as other important documents, if she wanted to live life here with me. I was wondering how I would adjust her to life in this country, since we needed a lot of the paperwork to be processed for her to become a citizen. But on my desk, I found an envelope filled with documents of Misaki's name and her new documents that certify her as a citizen of the Philippines. I sighed in relief as I came to Misaki, who had been excitedly setting up for our no longer distant relationship. I helped her set up her furniture and clothing, and right after, brought her out to dinner for our first date in the longest time. From the jolly look on her face, you would probably never even guess what she had lost. But I don't question it, and so as long as she's happy, so am I. We both went home tired and flopped into bed together. I looked back at my desk, where the envelopes were still placed. I immediately noticed something else placed on my desk that was not there before. A beautiful vase filled with forget-me-not flowers.